The most important thing is the infrastructure must be there.
Keeping in mind a sponge city concept.
There will be more investment on the technology side.
It's like a renewed appreciation to the district itself. Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. My name is Amalina Kamal.
And I'm Hazwin Hassan.
You know, Hazwin, Malaysia is going through a pretty exciting time, especially when it comes to its cities.
Oh, absolutely, Amalina. For once, we're talking about livability, sustainability, and cities that actually work for people.
Right. And it's about culture, economy, and environment, having to integrate that into the urban experience. And the opportunities are massive. With the right mix of planning, innovation, and collaboration, of course, Malaysia can actually set the standard for future-ready cities within the region.
Yes, that's right. Which is why today we're asking the big question. What does a future-proof city really look like? And how can Malaysia create urban spaces that are inclusive, connected, and resilient? Now, to help us explore that, we've got two brilliant minds in the studio with us today. We have chartered architect, urban planning, and Malaysia's built environment expert, Bain Lim, whose work has been focused on shaping communities through design principles that are not just functional, but also full of heart. Bain, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure to have you. We are also joined by economist and policy thinker, Professor Dr. Barjoya Bardai. Professor, thank you so much for joining Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Well, Professor understands how smart urban planning actually fuels long-term economic as well as social strength. So we're very excited to have you here as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, Professor. You are a Selangorian yourself, right?
Yes, I am.
Whereabouts specifically?
I was born in Meru, Klang, about 7 kilometers from Klang. Those days we cycled to school to Klang, and so I really saw the rapid development between Meru to Port Klang, and but those days Salam wasn't exist yet. Only when I grown up a bit, then they start planning about Shah Alam, and they started Salam when they want to build ITM, and that was.
Quite a nice time to see the
Yes.
progress and evolution, especially
Yes.
within the area. But of course, during your time, it's during a simpler time, right?
Yes.
Now, to start, I want to go basically big first, right? Bain. When we talk about future-proofing our cities, let's talk about Malaysia especially. What excites you the most about our current urban development plans, and what sort of cities have actually reached that sort of ideal state?
In my opinion, a city that's livable has a lot of wonderful infrastructure. The most important thing is the infrastructure must be there. And then you have a bit of history, you have a sense of place. You are attracted to go to live in that space because of all the amenities and services that can be provided. Say in the case of a district like in KL, for instance, if you go to a place like Ampang or Bangsa, for instance, why is it such a salubrious place to live in? Because all the amenities are there, from a kindergarten to secondary school, and then the universities are nearby. You have all the bank branches all available, the commercial side is there, all the leisure activities are also within walking distance. It's what is now described in modern development as a transit-oriented development, whereby if there's a LRT station nearby, you just have to be able to get onto the LRT within a 1 kilometer ride. You don't need a car. Then you plug in onto the system, you can go all over the town without having a car. So now cities are going in that direction. You provide the main mass rapid transit systems, and then you just plug in as an offshoot, a transit station and a township around there. So until and when we do that, provide infrastructure, we'll be stopped in our development by having massive traffic jams, unattractive environment, the noise, the pollution, just the sheer waste of time. Talking about livability, I like the idea that I can walk to work, I can go and enjoy a meal nearby without having to get into a car, go across a wide stretch of built environment just to go and have a meal. I can take my pet for a walk in that locality, safe environment. safe environment, away from cars, without traffic. Children can play, even just on the street, so to speak, because the traffic is controlled. There are calming devices. The traffic is calm. You have bumps and all. The roads are not straight roads. They're undulating, following the contours of the land.
It's like a rhythm. Then that is what an ideal city or ideal township looks like, right? Prof, from your lens, how does like smart, well-planned urban development directly actually support economic growth here?
Okay, if you look at the background in Selangor, today I can still drive along the road and go back to history, because we have many cowboys town in Selangor. Only from you see, if you drive from here, Meru is a cowboy town, Kapa, then Kampung Tok Muda, Sungai Serdang, Jeram, up to Sungai Besar, there, all are cowboy towns. It's still just 2 rows of shop, and it is still exists like that. I mean, it doesn't change. But of course, people may think that why are we allowing this to happen? Because the state is developing so rapidly, and yet this small town stay like that. To me, that is the strength of the state. What we need to do is we need to retrofit, and if we retrofit all this town, become retain the origin, and then we add to the development.
Right.
Of course, we can actually create a new meanings of development to Selangor without affecting the physical.
It's true, because we don't want to risk gentrifying that said area, right? As you mentioned, we've got a lot of cowboy towns, and each town or each neighborhood has its identity,
Right.
which you have its lived communities there, right? Growing up, understanding, and if you change it too much, then you're probably changing the soul. I like the way you think.
There's one part of Taman Tun that was cowboy town. There was just a street at the junction, and that winding road that led all the way to Sungai Buloh was the most beautiful road. There was a waterfall.
Yes.
There's Orang Asli settlement, and there were palm trees. Whenever visitors from abroad used to come to KL, I would take them just a rural trek just to there, just outside the outskirts of KL. No problem.
Right.
So these places are very important, the sense of history, a sense of place. So the name, do not lose it.
Right. In essence, I suppose it's about keeping the heritage, which is an important thing to consider with urban development in this modern day and age, right?
With a new development, a new township, you could create a new narrative. You could come up with an idea, an idealized idea. Whereas, as Prof said, there is an existing situation, the Chenjarum or some small town, Meru. You can build on that. That's the core idea of the space. And then you just add on the infrastructure.
Now, Bain, on exactly what future-ready cities look like in practice, do you think that KL, perhaps, or any other city here in Malaysia, offer any glimpses into this future?
When you talk about the livability of cities, one of the best ways to find out how good we are actually without our realizing it is to actually go into the internet, check up some of the reports or from travel logs and from Business Insider magazines and so on and so forth. They run polls, and believe you me, KL is actually number one, I think, at this moment in time, because it's not too expensive, good infrastructure in their opinion compared to some other places. I mean, Bangkok, for instance, all the traffic jams and so on and so forth. Singapore is too congested, very high cost of living. So when you compare yourself with your neighbors, you don't realize that you are better off. Here, we're always looking at our shoulder, thinking the grass is greener there, everything is better, and you take for granted what you have at home. Today, with technology, it's just incredible. I could be sitting, say, in Kuala Lumpur Baru, right, at a kopitiam, and I'm doing my work. I just whip out my phone, the office is on, okay, 24/7. I can transact business in Shanghai, Singapore, I can send my emails off. I just do that without the formality of an office. And when I need a space, I just rent a co-working space. The physical office is a white elephant of the past. People don't need to drive early morning, go to KLCC, fight the traffic to sit in an office and read your mail. You do that all at home. Everything is done. So by the time you pass all the traffic jams, 10 o'clock, you meet your client somewhere. Could be at eatery, it could be at a club, it could be at a sports club or whatever, and you do your business. So it's now the world is your oyster. It can be anywhere. You could be sitting by a paddy fields in Skin-Chan there, and doing some serious business,
Right.
discussing matters.
So accessibility here is like, it's not so much if we look at Malaysia's cities, but it's like the locality, the location, and whether or not we do
Absolutely.
have that access to 5G or at least access to great internet without disruption in that sense.
Without disruption. So
Right.
that's the thing about going to talk about this thing about how people talk about e-commerce and talking about being on the ball in terms of now all this high tech, everything is on e-commerce, everything is e-tech, okay?
Yep.
The problem with that is when your power supply is at risk. If there's an outage, then you're completely crippled. You can't move. Your ATMs don't work. You can't transact anything on your phone. So it is the city authorities or the state authorities to ensure power supply is maintained, water supplies, all the services are kept in tip-top order. They need to be upgraded. They need to
Right.
be maintained or upgraded to modern standards. So when you compare places like Singapore or Penang or Ipoh or elsewhere, again, it's now a different setting. You want to sit in a nice, enjoyable place to do your business. It could be a teh tarik stall, under this tree, under this rain tree, and you're enjoying yourself. You have a good meal and have a discussion with the client.
But having to look at trends, right? I'm going to go to Professor. In terms of investments, doesn't matter if it's infrastructure, doesn't matter if it's housing or sustainability, as Bain just mentioned. In what aspect does our investment trends have actually signaled that Malaysia is actually headed in the right direction? And what are some areas that really need to be looked into more?
Selangor has been able to attract foreign investors as well. And not only foreign investors that come into the industrialization manufacturing, but also in the infrastructure development. We have many developers, international developers, including that come and develop. And also the transportation. We have developed MRT, LRT, and all the transport facility.
I see.
We need the connectivity between the house to the station. And how do we solve this? Without changing or without investing further, we could go into a little bit of way of life and cultural. For example, visualize that we have this cart, like the horse cart, that will be pulled by a motorbike, that will be serving between the house and the MRT or LRT station, and between MRT to the office or destination. And that can be an attraction, and that will make Selangor as a garden city. Imagine that we have a small electric car, maybe that only have 2 seaters, that people can always take. Just like today, you can find the roller skate.
Or the scooters.
The
and
scooters,
stuff like
yeah.
Professor, but with that, right, we have those sort of like private or at least like open sort of interventions, right? However, it's not culturally in tune with the way we work. We've seen all the e-scooters being available, but the issue or the shortfall usually comes with how our own people handle them. So we've seen certain local municipalities actually introducing that, right? Go like free bikes, like how they have in London. But we don't know how to handle it. So what needs to be changed here?
I think when it comes to infrastructure, the bus routes, the trains, and all that stuff, the state must be involved, and it must be made as cheap as possible. Once you privatize it, where there's a cost to be gained from recovering your initial investment, it is too prohibitive. Imagine I'm a small family. It's still cheaper for me to buy a kanchil, get up earlier, and drop off all my siblings at their various workspace, right? And at the end of the day, pick them all up at the same time. It's still cheaper to run the kanchil than to take public transport. Until that equation is sorted out, people will buy more cars. They will not take the public transport, just for the pure convenience.
Right.
Your point about linkages, they're gaps. They are gaps. Now, when you look at the history of all our old towns and our villages, how they prospered was that they were either the end of a route. I mean, there was a bus terminal, there was a center. These termini were in the center of town. And then there was commerce around it. People come in from Bentong route, for instance, down to the Malacca Street bus station in Kuala Lumpur, and they'll stay in the hotels nearby. They'll eat in the eateries around there. And the whole Medan Selera was the entire length of Benteng at that time and leading on to KL.
Right.
So once you remove that node, that urban node, the city has got no direction. There's no center that gives growth. So in the case of KL, they removed the Klang bus station, they removed the Malacca Street bus station. You only left with Pudu Raya, for better or for worse. Prof was saying that you've got all these old towns, Meru, Kappa, and Janjarum, whatever. There's already a history involved. People settled there for a reason. Maybe the weather was kind, the topography was nice, the views were good, the food was good, or whatever. So do not let these old, beautiful villages disappear and just die. They're just bypassed by development. You should take that as the center, the core, and build on it. You have an instant narrative where your town is coming from.
I suppose we need to give people more of a reason to gather around these hubs, right? These centers for hustling and bustling sort of human activity. So how can we make that work now?
I mean, talking about, say, a state like Perak, for instance, a lot of the towns, a lot of the small villages were built on the tin industry. We were the world's largest exporter of tin. So from Gopeng to, all these small towns along the way, Bidor and all that, they were just way stations as you went up the whole trunk road. Okay, certain places become famous for the food. Bidor is very famous for its biscuits. Some sort of special biscuits they have. Or in the case of Kajang, Kajang was famous for its satay. We went to Ampang for Yong Tau Fu, for instance, and people will make a beeline. Malaysians have an opinion on food. They love their food, So they will make the effort to go and enjoy the food. They'll drive there, all the way out there. So my point is, if you can use that as a starting point, create a narrative around there and build your storyline on that.
Right. And that's important, right? Again, it goes back to the identity. It goes back to the, I suppose, kinship in that sense that an individual have towards that particular area that they're living in and how they portray that to the outside communities. And we have to be proud about it, right?
We're talking a lot about accessibility here, but now with our phones and all the apps on our phones, if I wanted to order food, I don't have to physically walk or drive to get food. I can order it off from the many e-hailing services, right?
Yeah.
Again, how do we make it more appealing for people to physically gather, go there, rather than just ordering it off their phones?
I mean, you cannot replace the eating fresh from the oven and eating environment with the takeaway, because always when we get our takeaway food, we know that number one, it is not the same quality. Number two is basically we don't have the environment. We are eating alone in the house, and I mean, I know when I eat kway teow, for example, or the Japanese food especially, the entrepreneur said that you must make that sound to really make it enjoyable. I mean,
I think you're talking about the ambience of a restaurant. You go to whether it's a coffee shop or cafe, it's just the ambience, the sound of people, and the human touch. You want to talk to somebody at the counter. When you anonymously press a button, there's no interaction. It becomes very cold, inhumane.
That's right. And you remind me of when I walk in some restaurants, sometimes they'll have these signages up saying, pretend it's 1995 and that there's no Wi-Fi or internet and talk to each other rather than just look at your screens.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And you see what happened is that through to development, first we started with the high street. Each shop was different. You went to a shoe shop, you went next door, they were selling haberdasheries. Next shop was just selling pens and stationery. So you went from along the main high street, different shops, different experiences. That became a shopping mall. They put a roof over it, a fully contained environment, 24/7, can rain or shine, it will operate.
Right.
So the shops then became cubicles within a shopping mall, little slots. And then this scale of shopping malls became bigger and bigger until it became huge malls, hyper malls, like we mention names there, but very, very large ones. And you just drive there and you just get stuck there. But after a while, the mall dies because it doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have that old feel of a town street. So, Batu Road, Kuala Lumpur,
Right.
the most famous shopping street at that
Yeah.
time. So what happens is that when you have this e-hailing exercise where you order your food, it's even more divorced from that. So if you go to a place like, say, Australia, a place like Perth, for instance, people have gone away from that. They much rather drive out to Fremantle and sit by the streets there and have the cafe on the roadside. We could recreate that in KL, and we are doing that to some extent.
To be fair, I myself do actually now drive to KL, specifically parts of Chinatown,
Yeah.
because they have managed to actually revive the, I suppose, not just identity, why it's like, because through history, right? It's like a renewed appreciation to the district itself. I didn't even know that in the Jalan Balai itself, that is the oldest our postal company is actually there as well, and now it's turned into a like a cafe, but like a kopitiam, right?
Yep.
So we love that actually. To be fair, I mean, if they've stressed
Yep.
that it's actually really good for this day and age. So
The history is very important. I mean, Chinatown it started off as a mining settlement,
Yeah.
and then when we hit it rich, they became rich. All the carpetbaggers came, they provided services, provided goods, and the town grew from there. So a lot of history. Right next door to that post office, right, there's a very old Gurdwara which served the Sikhs,
it's also the police
police
station, yeah.
Gurdwara. So there's so much, all the nooks and crannies, the lane. But the thing about Chinatown is that architecturally, none of the buildings are of superlative quality to warrant heritage conservation. But as a totality, as a whole street, it is so lively. You from morning till night. I could do my exercises on the rooftop. I can do my yoga exercises, do my Tai Chi exercises there. I can go down the road, get my nails done, further down, there's also the funeral parlors. In those days, at the end of the street, Petaling Street, all within a 1 mile walking distance. Everything is done from cradle to grave.
So I suppose that's
So
the kind of
that's the essence of a city.
Correct. And that's the kind of economic sort of viability that we need, right? Replicated, especially in outside of cities such as, or at least areas such as that.
I do not know whether you realize or not. In Selangor, there is still a plantation, and Selangor is supposed to be a kind of a
Industrialized.
state that is so industrialized. We are now in the strategy of food security. Can we works to make this plantation as our food security center?
Yeah.
And we can then have activities from planting vegetables, all kind of foods, and so that we can achieve self-sufficiency for the state.
Yeah, understood. Because it is actually a very burning topic as well. And if you want to make it more hip, I suppose, is the farm to table sort of concept,
Absolutely.
right? That we want to also attract.
One example can think of is in Singapore. Land is scarce. So they build multi-story urban farms. Okay, it's hydroponics, aeroponics, or whatever. The point is, whenever you do any urban farming, it's a problem of logistics. Where's your point of sale? You're serving the community in the area. So if I produce the best vegetables, I can serve the restaurants in the area. So there's no issue of transport in and out of town. So the logistic part must be taken care of. So who is your immediate client who's going to buy, like you say, from the farm straight to the table to serve the food? If that aspect is looked at, then you're okay. At the moment, we have a tremendous industrial heritage from the past, which is now just ignored. I'm currently at the moment enlisting about at least 10 sites throughout the country based on our industrial heritage. This is for UNESCO. Anyway, say for instance, in the case of Malaysia, we are the world's largest producer of rubber, and then also tin. So remember those rubber smoke houses? Those are buildings which are now can be rehabilitated, made into a nice, salubrious place to makan,
Right.
And you go to Sentul, for instance, they had those old railway yards, now converted into another, given an adaptive reuse of an old heritage structure. So outside Ipoh, there's this big town, I don't know if it's Tualang or whatever, there's huge tin dredge, which can be converted to a museum and, all the peripheral areas around there. Record our history. If you go to Sungai Lembing, for instance, it's a 200 miles of subterranean mining. It's one of the few large tin mines subterranean. The town is there, but it's dying. There's no need to do that. People travel now. People travel all over the world to see something different, not want to see what they have at home.
Yeah, right.
So you should bank on your history, bank on your heritage, and build the story from there and develop.
I mean, since you mentioned this, because we are going to go into having to focus and zoom in on Selangor in particular, and just to kind of echo what you just said, go into the history, right? I was pleasantly surprised with the history of Jugra. Jugra,
Yes, it's a royal
Jugra
town.
is a royal town, right? And it is Selangor. How can we encourage even Selangorians to appreciate territories that they might not necessarily look into? They basically look at KL if they want to have, recreational activities, or they want to learn more from, or even go to Ipoh or Negeri Sembilan, but they don't actually look within. So how can we create better appreciation towards the history of our city?
Banting has developed also rapidly and is going to the Jugra, and you see actually between Morib to Banting, there are many historical traces there, and you can see all those royal family there, and they have their house design that are a little bit different. And in Jugra itself, we can see traces of history. And what we need to do is using the retrofit technology, and we could retrofit this building and turn it into still valuable building, but with this historical background. And
cultural center, really.
Right.
Basically.
No, we can actually be like Malacca.
Right.
It's older than Malacca, if I'm not mistaken.
Of course.
But anyway, Selangor, of course, right, is widely known to be the most populous state, especially in Malaysia, and is an economic powerhouse, having to basically contribute 25.9% to the national GDP in 2023. In 2024, the state actually achieved 5.4 GDP growth, surpassing national average of 3.6. Correct me if I'm wrong, Professor. It also secured 101.1 billion ringgit in approved investment, marking an 83% increase from the previous year. Now, that's a big leap.
Talking about that, when you had a lot of international investment, Selangor was very fortunate. You had great industrial parks, and the infrastructure was strong. So at one time, there was an influx of Japanese investment, and they invested very heavily because there was an educated working force to people, their factories. But they had a very strong community, and the community made great efforts to integrate into the local setup, so much so that at the height of it, they had the Bon Odori Festival, which is celebrated in the old stadium, Right. It becomes such a big event. It's a cultural exchange. Selangor becomes very cosmopolitan. At one time, there was a lot of Taiwanese investment. People coming from outside investing, it could be from another state, But we should integrate, bring in all these cultural activities, these sort of things, and make it a nice place to live in, a different character. When you look at the master plan, things are going so fast, and the way, pockets of excellence, but at the linkages where the interface between one area and another area, as a housing district or as a housing development or commercial development, when the boundaries are too touch, right, you have got to make sure that the systems integrate into each other. You don't want a situation where a small road suddenly becomes enlarged into a major arterial road with traffic congestion. Okay. So when you do any sort of modern development, you have to be aware that the local populace is very small. There's a huge influx of outsiders who've got no linkage.
Now, Bain, I want to move on to TOD, which you mentioned briefly earlier. which stands for Transit-Oriented Development. Now, in this respect, now how is mobility being reimagined in Selangor, taking into account, of course, TOD development, and why does it matter?
Mobility in the sense that one should be able to walk comfortably, with the walkability of a space. You see, if I now live in like say next to a MRT station, like I say, I just hop off the MRT station, I walk 20 minutes, I'm at my apartment to live up. I don't need to hail a cab, and if preferably is covered spaces, that means in sun and rain I can still do it. Cars should be relegated away from the city, to my mind. You got these huge trucks going through Malacca, Jonker Street, which is crazy. They should be kept away from. You go to other European cities, for instance, they treasure their heritage. They keep the cars away, make it pedestrianized. You can use the bicycles, things like that. So this transit-oriented development is the idea that I can live on top, just go down, take a train, and just go off. And then eat and everything there.
Because you brought it up, the Jonker Street, Jonker Walk in Malacca, famously known. I think initially, well, at least during the historical times, right, it was supposed to be the center of the town. People would, gather there and do business work and so on. Now, one thing I think that they've kept, which is good, is the fact that it's, one way, all the way, which I think it's initially, they probably didn't consider the fact that, when cars started coming in, then that's going to be a huge impediment to getting, accessibility and so on. Do you think moving forwards, when we think about TOD development and making streets more accessible, like you said, within a kilometer from A to B, can we include this, make streets one-way streets, making it less favorable for cars to pass through?
The fact that you have a TOD means you preclude cars.
Okay.
I don't need to own a car.
Okay.
So it's self-explanatory. But the only thing is that we are stuck with this cost of using the MRT as opposed to buying a Kanchil and ferry all my siblings around. It's still cheaper to buy a Kanchil and pay for all the transport of 4 siblings working in different places within town. But in terms of traffic, when you do a traffic layout, you start off with a highway, we're driving 110. You slow down to a feeder road, down to 60. Then you go down to a small side road. Then you go down to the one right in front of your car. It's 10 kilometers per hour. You slow down to your heartbeat also comes down.
Okay.
So it's not just about rerouting traffic, but it's more of like how we actually create that system and utilize that. Yeah. Prof, can we go into smart technologies here, right, Prof? And how digital economy actually fit in when it comes to shaping urban and economic resilience here. I want to look into Selangor's investments. And again, how is it being data driven, especially in its approaches?
First of all, the government must invest in the big data analytic facilities. So they must be able to actually gather detailed data of each citizen in Selangor, so that they will be able to monitor their affairs. Because we need to know their well-being. And we need to know their consumption, we need to know their income, their expenses, and how well they live, their health. So all this needs not only investment from the state, but also the supporting businesses that will actually create opportunity, business opportunity from that. And then we also look at, for example, today, Malaysia aspire to be a nation that is really focused on developing semiconductor. We've been in semiconductor business for a long time, over 50 years. But we actually are confined to a lot of assembly, packaging, and re-export. Now we are going into chip design. And Selangor should be the best place for this. We have Cyberjaya, we have a technology park, part of it, and of course Shah Alam and and on the other side, Rawang, we have all the institution, institution of higher learning that can support it, and we should capture this, capitalize this opportunity, and invest in it. The state government must have a particular project to really capture this opportunity, because that will be a new routes of development. We talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about robotic, we talk about Internet of Things. There has already been seed on this development. For example, company like Panasonic now, when they develop housing development, they develop smart housing, not only smart housing but smart city. So this can be an important feature that will can project in the future.
Right. On that note, right, so how can Selangor actually continue to attract the kind of public-private partnerships that serve this aspect that you just mentioned, the digital forwardness, as well as the everyday needs of its communities?
Essentially, Selangor has done very well in that. I mean, PKNS has been doing a superb job in creating development initiative, partnering with international firms and so on. But what we need now is to bring in the technology element, so that there will be more investment on the technology side in the same activities of property development, for example. And of course, we need to take into account how we will want to make sure that the development will be not only focusing on the high end properties, but also to include the every level of the society.
Now, with regard to smart technology, you're only as smart as the operator behind it. As Prof mentioned, you got a lot of data, but you don't know what to use with the data. So it flops at that level. Right. At another level, there's what's called UX UI, user experience and user interface. So for a lot of the public at large, they find it very confronting to go to an app or a site and just to negotiate, to do a submission or pay a bill. It is so convoluted. So the authorities should employ good UX UI firms, to come up with solutions which are user friendly.
Right, Bain. So leveraging off, using technology to our advantage, I want to talk about one particular project in Selangor, one of the initiatives in Selangor, which is the KSSA project, the Complex Sukan Shah Alam, right? Talking about it as perhaps the blueprint for similar future city projects. So forward thinking, do you think KSSA is an example of this infrastructure?
Well, it's a major sporting space, okay? Very few cities have the privilege of a big venue, a grand venue. Yep. You can organize a big football tournament there, for instance. In the past, the question is not so much the sporting events. It is what do you use that same space and area allocated when it's not a sporting event. For instance, there are huge open-air car park areas which could be transformed into night markets, into flea markets, into Pasar Tani, for instance, And it could also be landscape where it's so easily converted into a salubrious area to let the same space be get two values. Right. One as a sporting event space, and then as an alternate event space for other activities.
I remember visiting Montreal. Montreal hosts the World Olympics game, and after the Olympic, they do not know what to do with all the stadium. And today they turn it into some laboratory for science and research and development, for museum, for activities indoor, because in Montreal, the temperature can go below 20 degrees.
Right, yeah.
So, and that to me was brilliant because it is now fully utilized all year round.
Yeah.
Most stadiums, normally they'll serve, if it's not for a large multinational sporting event, then it'll turn into a concert venue.
Concerts, yeah.
That's typically, how it's done. Now, one thing I want to point out to from the KSSA project is its effort towards flood mitigation, which is actually a spillover from this futuristic design, right, from the smart city design, where, as we all know, in Shalam, it's very prone to flooding. Especially in areas like Section 13, where the original stadium was built, and where the KSSA development is going to happen, right? But now with the project, what they're doing is they're making sure that there's a large water catchment
Yes.
area, which I believe is about over 4 hectares, I think, and also designing the stadium or the complex, keeping in mind a sponge city concept.
Yeah. When you talk about flood mitigation, you have to look at the master plan, the original master plan for the development of Selangor.
Okay.
I'm very, very sure, because we're living in an equatorial climate with huge deluge of rainwater, where they're going to instant, over 2 hours of heavy rain, the water levels go up, the rivers get swollen. And so the waters that are fed into that river from the drains into the river will not go into the river because the water is actually swollen to a higher level. They need to have detention ponds, temporary spaces where the water is kept, and when the water level goes down, then the feeds back into the river. So you do not have this case of a flood situation. You used to have soft edges where water can percolate to the side and get absorbed into this sort of semi-marshy sort of setup. That idea of a sponge city was very successful, implemented all over the world. This architect actually won, landscape architect, got a lot of international awards for it, and it's being implemented. So from there, he has actually dismantled a lot of these hardscapes and made it soft. You know, so the idea of a sponge, like you say, if you had a sponge by your wash basin, for instance, right? It can be sodden with water, it can be dry, but the water is temporarily contained by that soft edge. Soft edge. So you have water parks along the riverside, expand into riverside.
I suppose it is a key sort of like feature, especially when it comes to this KSSA project, right? Because it is trying to address the qualms or the grouses of the residents of a particular area. I myself was I formerly lived in Section 13 itself, and there were 2 pressing concerns there: traffic control whenever there's games. Second would be the floods, So it's quite interesting to see how this is going to take up and how it's going to transpire later on.
In our water management, we should recognize the existence of aquifer water and aquifer reserve. During the rainy season, we could explore possibility of channeling some of the rainwater down, so that and this we can create a channel all along the river, or we have many lakes, for example, and I'm sure there is reservoir down there that needs we need to investigate this and really manage it so that we have a natural cycle of water.
I mean, the whole of Selangor, there are limestone caverns underneath, So, you talk about that as a place to contain the water. It percolates right through huge caverns.
Right. So we've got natural waterways.
Waterways
already.
underneath. It's just not exploited.
I mean, still on this whole designing with nature in mind and the ecosystem in mind, I really want to go into how can we better build public spaces that don't necessarily take green infrastructure as like a nice facade, like just a show and tell aspect, right? But actually reimagining it to serve the people as well as the planet.
Sometimes one doesn't have to be obvious. I mean, for me, I get a bit upset, when I go to a place and the name of the city is like put in huge block letters, Kuala Kangsar, across this beautiful green landscape. You don't need to put a label, Bain Lim on me. I don't need to tell the whole what I am.
Yeah.
You are what you are. The sheer beauty of it. Imagine Taiping Lake, and then you just had the word Taiping Lake written all over it, big letters. So that's too obvious. So recently they did a building to restore one of the oldest timber mosques up in Kelantan. And as you approach the mosque, the signage was bigger than the actual building itself. I mean, it defeats the purpose. So your point about creating this sense of place, it's just make it salubrious. In the hottest weather, right, when the sun is at its zenith at 12 o'clock, when you're going to have a teh tarik at the store, you go to where the darkest shadow is. So you provide shade where it's open, right? The tarmac gets so hot. So I will head for the darkest shadow under that tree and enjoy my teh tarik there. So you create an environment where it's salubrious, very comfortable. There's a gentle breeze, traffic is away from you, no dust, no sound, things like that. Make it salubrious, make
And
it
less,
nice.
less kind of in your face.
Not less in your face,
No,
like I say,
yeah.
I don't carry a label or we don't put a label and say table, chair. You don't need to state the
Yeah.
obvious.
It's also 2025. It's
Yeah.
the 21st century. People want genuinity and
Yes,
authenticity.
they want authenticity, they want to touch and feel, you see.
Or used to visit the Pekan Baru in Indonesia. This is on top of mountain.
Yep.
But one very peculiar culture that they have is around the house or any building, they will have this pond that they will rear ikan gurami.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
gurami is a very expensive fish.
Kissing fish, they used to
Yes,
call
yes.
them, kissing gurami.
And the moss, they have this pond that generate enough revenue to actually fund the whole moss.
Oh
Yep.
wow!
So they can get as much as 20,000 ringgit a month
As incentive
as
for
an
that.
income
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
to
all
take
right.
care of the moss.
Okay.
So can you imagine if Kuala Lumpur here, every building will have this drain around? I mean, it's like a pond,
water feature.
water feature,
Water feature.
and they just put in this fish. And tilapia, red tilapia is today 18 ringgit a kilo. No?
Yeah.
you might be giving people ideas then.
No, they used to do that for abandoned buildings. Like
Okay.
in Seremban, they dug up the convent, and it's a huge water body there. You just
Okay.
feed. You can cultivate tilapia over the past 20 years. You could have made lots of money from there.
Okay, I want to talk about how collaboration is the catalyst, especially when it comes to having having a successful future-proof city, right? Bain, question to you: what kind of collaborations do you see between designers, local councils, as well as citizens are actually essential in building a robust environment that actually truly thrive?
I think you have to talk together. Everybody has got to. It's actually teamwork. You cannot design as individual islands. You have to work together as a team. We have a football team. There are 11 on the thing. It's not like playing doubles. So the entrepreneurs, the people investing, must talk to the architects, talk to the interior designers, talk to even the people who sell the idea of the narrative. People who dream the dream of a new city. The image builders and all that stuff. The whole thing must come together as one. It cannot be done in isolation.
Everything must be based on sustainable development. So we talk about green technology, green funding, and sustainable effort. I mean, we want to not focus on profit alone. It must be a balanced focus. It must involve everybody. And actually, the 17th Sustainable Development Goal covers all aspects. That if we take every team in it, we'll not go wrong.
Right. And the time is now, actually,
Yes, time
to
is
be
now.
looking into it.
My own belief is my carbon footprint should be zero. I mean, I'm into the rehabilitation of old heritage structures. An old shop house, for instance, high ceilings, cross ventilation, heavy thermal mass. The building doesn't get too hot, all right? And you had pitch roofs with a jack roof to cross ventilate the roof. They were designed hundreds of years ago. In the case of Malacca, 600 years ago. In the case of KL, maybe 200 years old.
Yeah.
These buildings were naturally sustainable. No aircon, electricity wasn't invented
Right.
then.
And that's what it's all about. in terms of having to look at Selangor and how we can actually, uphold it the best way we can, especially being a Selangorian myself. If you can ask yourself, how I want to see Selangor in the next 10 years, what would you say?
I think Selangor has got a marvelous hinterland. I mean, it's still got a lot of green, forested areas. I mean, if I went up north on the trunk road, I see a lot of green areas. You've got a beautiful hinterland of that. It's not a sparse landscape, very post-mining, where it's tailings and all that stuff. You have got that. You've got a very young population, which is very adaptable, right? So people actually have come from other states to come to KL and to Selangor area, the whole town, state, to seek a living and find a future. When we talk about the future, do not be too worried about the distant future. The immediate future is actually the present. We have a large population, very young population, willing to come and live and work here. All right. In the case of, say, Johor, for instance, a lot of people move down south. They from Batu Pahat and all that stuff. They go down to JB and they hop over to Singapore and find work there. We don't have that problem in Selangor. We're actually attracting a lot of people.
In Selangor, we are blessed with the sea line. Actually, from Sepang to Sabak Bernam is all saw. So we should capitalize that.
Yep.
And if we can capitalize that, then perhaps that is the next course of development.
Right.
For Selangor.
Yeah. What about the Paris Riviera? Should be the Selangor
Yes,
Riviera, right?
right.
Or
Absolutely.
the Chao Phraya River, Selangor Klang River.
Yes, that's another
Yeah.
thing. The river. We have the river. Before I heard about this linear city development, which is very forward-looking, and I hope that something will materialize. That we have. I think our river is as good as perhaps a river in Italy.
Right. Great civilizations over the course of history have been built around rivers.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Mesopotamia, I have that in mind, especially when you talked about these linear cities being planned. Perhaps it's worth a revisit.
Yes.
We should definitely, have that coming.
Right, yeah. Waterways as our part of our roadways or networks. That's all the time we have for today. If you like this particular episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell, because you'll not only get Beyond the Headlines update, other NSC Online's news reports will be delivered to you. Once again, I'd like to thank our guests that are on set today. First up, we've got Bain Lim. Thank you so much, Bain, for being on Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you.
And to Professor Dr. Bajra Barda, thank you so much as well for being on the show. Thank you, Hazwin, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And to our audience, my name is Amalina Kamal. I'll see you next week.